Good afternoon, good evening, good metal. My name's Coop and welcome to the Spoken Metal Show. This is a nice one today. This is with Sareth, fabulous individual who got in touch with us and about coming on the show. And what hasn't the gentleman done? What hasn't he done? Originally starting with an internship with Clive Barker, then coming to do some bits and pieces with the RZA at the Wu-Tang Clan, journalist, photographer around the Hollywood Strip, and all that time with some fabulous bands coming through. Comedian, stand-up personality, just every sort of facet. When we talk about revenue streams and fingers in pies and stuff, Sareth is just doing all kinds of stuff, hugely inspirational, and doesn't even realise it. So I made sure that I told him as well during the episode. It's probably better you check out his stuff. I'll put some links on the podcast and what have you of all the various things he did. But then to go out after being in LA and stuff, go out from there and move out to Colorado and start forming your own festival and do your own thing, which he's doing now, which is fabulous. Really, really interesting individual with some greater views and outlooks on the scene, and particularly, like I say, the Hollywood Strip and stuff during like the 90s and things like that, and 2000s. Really, really insightful, really, really interesting gentleman, and we'll definitely get Sareth on again, 100%. So without further ado, please enjoy this show. Thanks for all the feedback. Make sure you share it with people who you think would enjoy it as well. And I give you Sareth. So, ladies and gentlemen, a real special guest, I think you'll find on the show today. Someone who approached me to come on the show, and I went through his personal sort of EPK, his electronic press kit, and was floored by some of the fantastic things that he had going on, chiefly of which being a promoter and falling into becoming a promoter and a concert promoter. But there's a whole load of things that we need to talk about with today's guest. Sareth is with us. Thank you for coming on the show, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It means a lot.
Sareth is from the one of our US friends, formerly Cambodian, and so we're definitely going to get into all that kind of thing. But from across the pond in the US, he's based at the moment. And where the hell do we start? And what an interesting and fascinating story you really do have. One of the things that maybe some of the listeners will be mostly familiar with is one of the first starting points for yourself is with Clive Barker. A lot of people will know Clive from being around in and around Liverpool, and that connection and you meeting him seems to be quite a pivotal moment in your life.
Oh, absolutely. It was just like completely accidental because I was looking for an internship to graduate college, and someone had sent me a message on MySpace back in the day saying that he was releasing a new book called Mr. Begone. And it was about a demon that possessed the book while you were reading it. And the demon was jumping on my page. It was moving, as it said in the book, and there was nothing causing it to move. And I looked over, and the page was moving, and it freaked me out. I'm like, holy crap, this is amazing. And so he had scared me with like Hellraiser and Candyman and stuff like that in my early years, because Candyman scared me for like 6 years straight. And I'm like, I really got to learn how to scare people like he scared me. So I reached out to him, and it was beautiful. Like everything just unfolded. Like I messaged his website developers, Phil and Sarah, and they forwarded my email to his people in LA. And then they said, give us a date, send us your resume. And at the time it had like a hardware store on it. And that was about it. No film work, no like written works, no nothing. And so it was just like me. I just said, just mold me the way you want me to be. And then I'm happy. Just like give me knowledge, you know? And then he interviewed me himself, like from his house. And I was like floored. Like when I saw him, I'm like, holy crap, do you know who you are? You know? And I just lit up as a Christmas tree. Like it was nuts. And he just asked me 3 questions. And he goes, I love you, kid. You're in, but you just have to wait a year and write me every single week before you get here. And you got the gig. And I'm like, wow, that was pretty intense.
Yeah. I think that sounds like it really set you on a journey at that point. And we'll go into kind of the movements from that journey. But I think what a lot of people will probably be interested to hear is when you, and I start a lot of these podcasts with when you first, because clearly music is an incredible part of your life and a shaping force within it. When did you first start to hear music, and what were those first music things you got into?
It was like pretty much top 40 radio, like in the 80s, and I was remember listening to like Madonna,
Mm.
and that first stood out, my first music memory. And of course, like there was Boy George, and there was like just everyone that was like on top 40 radio, like Karma Chameleon and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I got to my mid in the early 90s, I stumbled upon MTV at a friend's house, and I saw Dr. Dre The Chronic. And I'm like,
Sure.
oh my gosh, this is pretty incredible. And so I had my dad buy me a Dre Day single at the mall because I wasn't old enough to buy it yet.
I love it.
And they popped it in the van, and we listened to it all the way down from like this town over, and then all the way back home on repeat. It was the only song that played, and I remember that quite well.
Yeah.
And then
was it kind of? Did you find yourself gravitating to certain genres then as well, like rap music and that type of thing, or was it still the top 40 for quite a while? Because at that stage, there was an enormous amount of rap prominence in the charts, wasn't there?
Oh, big time. Especially like when I was like watching like MTV Raps, every time I went and slept at my cousin's house because they were the only ones that had cable, and my parents couldn't afford it at the time. So I'm like, all right, this is pretty neat. And we were staying up and watching MTV Raps. And then like in the late 90s, of course, like the Wu-Tang Clan dropped Wu-Tang Forever. And I'm like, oh my God. My sister actually bought it from Europe during her European travels. And I'm like, this is a double album that's absolutely amazing. I got to listen to more of this. And then I went and then like the only thing that like bridged my gap from like hip hop and like top 40 in the early 2000s was actually Linkin Park's Hybrid Theory.
Right, yeah.
Because there's so many genres in it, and I'm like, holy moly, there's so many in this. And then like my bonds with other people started like branching out more, and like I was being friends with like other people that liked Linkin Park, and they were introducing me to like more rock music that wasn't Linkin Park, and like taking me to shows and stuff like that. Like, and then my second concert ever was Metallica with Deftones, Mudvayne, Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, and I think I mentioned Deftones, but they were on the bill too, and that was like my second concert ever. My first concert ever was Eminem, but like my very first concert was Metallica, so that was pretty awesome.
That means, ladies and gentlemen, now we know Sareth he can be on the show, and it's fine because his first show is Metallica. It's interesting. We were talking before we came on the show about how metal and rock music has very similar vibes and energies with rap and that type of thing. It has similar sort of feelings and energies, certainly we were talking about how a lot of the rap and kind of mixes with metal quite well, and a lot of like someone like Dr. Dre on the recent sort of Netflix documentary he was on, he was listening to Nirvana and bands like that, and I think it's because those types of music share very similar thought processes and very similar sort of ways of coming out there, born from struggle and oppression and poverty and that type of thing. And so when you were listening to, did you have quite a wide spread of music, it sounds then? So you were listening to Linkin Park and rock and that type of thing, and you were listening to top 40, and then you were listening to rap and that type of thing. But for you, I imagine it was just all something you were listening to. You didn't really specify genres.
Yep. I mean, I didn't know how to work the radio dial or nothing. I was just in the car listening with my buddies, and I'm like, whatever you have on the radio, I'm fine with. And then like eventually, like I started falling in love with live music, and I was like, hey, there's people in the photo pit. I wonder how to get down there. And then
yeah.
And I was like, how do I get that close to them and take photos? I'm tired of like shooting from like afar.
Oh, and so you were into photography as well at this point then?
Yeah, right after college, because I interviewed my first group called 303.
Okay.
And they're like they're in Fort Collins. They did a song with Katy Perry and stuff like that. Just look into them and stuff. And I majored in that, and and then when I was with Clive, he goes, whatever you do, like just don't pigeonhole yourself in hip hop, like, or else you'll be stuck with hip hop shows. Because I was stuck in horror, and everyone just knows me for horror. And I go just experience everything from like, because like you're pretty much down the street from the Sunset Strip. There's every single genre of music on the Sunset Strip. Yeah. And just go explore. And so I went and saw ska and hip hop and death metal and just everything that I've ever wanted. Like the Viper Room was there, the Whiskey A Go Go, the Key Club, the Roxy, the House of Blues, and the Will Turn, like a couple blocks more, and the Palladium. Like I saw the Lamb of God at the Palladium, and I covered them. It was just awesome.
Wow.
And
So for all listeners that maybe have never been to LA and what have you, these venues that I'm sure you're more than aware of, ladies and gentlemen, are like iconic places. You know, the Rainbow and this type of thing we talk about all the time as being iconic venues. But they really are. When Sareth's talking about blocks, he's talking about only maybe a 2 or 3 minute walk from each other. You can go, you know, the Whiskey and the Rainbow and the Troubadour are all pretty much within. You can see them, and that's what makes up the Strip. And you can come out of one gig, and there's a whole load of people in another gig coming out, and you found that there's this wonderful clash of people in a good way, who kind of just occupy the Strip. You must have seen that was a real heyday. For some, especially for rap, but most definitely for metal, that was a real heyday. Then you must have seen some unbelievable fair shows. Like System of a Down, one of their very first shows was on the Strip, if I remember rightly, and they were playing. They invented like street teams and stuff based upon the stuff that was going on the Strip as well. Like, it's fantastic. So you're studying photography, and Clive says, you know, go and experience everything. When did you start going into the pit, if you will, in the photo pit, and actually getting that close?
Oh, it was like I owe it all to Clive, of course, because like in 2009 he tweeted about me, and I didn't expect nothing of it, you know. And he tweeted it like and I'll remember it as like he said, Sareth is a gentleman and much loved in my household. I hold him in the highest regard, and I put it on my press kit, as you have seen, and I'm like, this is nuts. Like, this is like what Stephen King did to co-sign him, and then his career blew up. And then, like, as soon as I started writing about, like, the local acts and the people, like, I started finding my voice and, like, how I wanted to, like, make my articles, like, my own voice. Like, I was, like, approached by publicists, and, like, I was on their emailing list, and I opened up the LA Weekly, and I found out their publicist and reached out to their publicist, and, like, we love the way you write about our clients. And they were Soundgarden and Deftones and Lamb of God, and, like, just, I got to write about UFO at the Key Club. Like, you know, they're a really old band. And
fantastic.
And they got to write about
one of the things, ladies and gentlemen, as well, that Sareth's talking about, because I've wrote myself, is quite often people struggle to find their, what's called in the writing trade, their prose, their kind of way of speaking. So I speak a certain way and have a certain flow to my voice, and Sareth has a flow to his voice that's very unique. And what you're looking for as a writer is to translate that into the written form, so it comes across off the page. Like Sareth was reading Clive Barker, and Clive's writing makes it, the imagery come forward, and that's what, you know, draws Sareth in. And so you were finding your voice. Were you interviewing bands as well, or you were just writing about them at this point?
My very first interview was with Cypress Hill, Be Real from Cypress Hill, and he did a, you know, Rock Superstar and like all that stuff.
Huge, yeah.
And like at the time, like Clive's nephew and was there, and he goes, you got to interview Be Real? I'm like, yeah, it was my very first professional interview. And we were backstage at the House of Blues, and marijuana was all over the coffee table, and it was so potent.
As expected, yeah, as expected.
And it was like sold out, and he was just amazed. And you know, and he goes, I can't believe you made Be Real laugh. And I'm like, I can't either. We were talking about pro wrestling and stuff, and it was just gnarly because I grew up on pro wrestling too, and so we just bonded over that, and it was just awesome.
It's interesting how musics and genres also blend into social things like wrestling and professional wrestling.
Yep.
And how they kind of bleed in and wove in, especially during like the 90s, when a lot of like music that you were hearing on pro wrestling was made by bands like Disturbed and stuff like that. We're getting theme tunes for wrestlers and stuff. There's this wonderful crossover. So you were like hugely judging by, like I say, the things that I've read and the pieces that you've put forward. You were hugely prolific in interviewing, writing about the scene, and really involving yourself in it. Really kind of what's the way to say? Immersing is the way to put it. Immersing yourself in the scene. What was that like at that sort of particular period of time? It's especially in LA. That must have felt like, you know, early 70s, late 60s explosion of music. It must have felt like at that time.
Oh, absolutely. It was just pure magic. I mean, all the venues were open still, like the Key Club and the House of Blues, but unfortunately they shut down. Mm-hmm. But like, but when they were still open, I just got to see like 50 years of music just right before my eyes. I was just going into like a time traveling machine. And I got to cover the doors at the House of Blues, like without Jim Morrison, of course, but like other people stepped in to sing for them. And I'm like, this is unreal. Like I got to like just see it all, and it was just like, it it was a place for like all the misfits and the black sheep. It was that part of LA that I loved. Like it didn't matter what you look like or what you were wearing, just you were accepted.
Yeah.
And like, I would frequent the Rainbow all the time, and they would always remember my favorite drink, and it was like an Arnold Palmer, and they would always have it ready for it. Like as soon as I walk in the door, they knew what I wanted, and they're like, "Oh, you guys are the best," Of course, I drank water, but like they knew that Arnold Palmer was at this for this table, and it was fantastic. And if you don't know what an Arnold Palmer is, it's half iced tea, half lemonade, and like Clive turned me into a tea fiend, and because he drinks a lot of tea, and I remember making tea for him all the time. And it was fantastic. I mean, I got to, I was thankful to see all these shows for free as a journalist, because I couldn't have afforded any of this stuff like as like a regular person, as a regular spectator. And of course, like instead of like knowing that I had these shows for free, I took the money that I made. I would spend it on the bands, and I would buy merch from them, because I wanted them to have like some kind of money from me. Like I have like a big old trash bag at home with just nothing but band shirts all across the board, from punk to hip hop to everything. And they're like, this bag weighs like 50 pounds. And like, I'm like, I don't know what to do with it. Like my closet's full of black concert shirts. And now I'm fortunate to have my own concert shirts and tour shirts now. And it's just it came back full circle, and I couldn't have asked for more.
There was when I used to do the same, used to write and review and interview bands, and I always felt a little bit guilty if I didn't buy something from them. I thought, I've got into the venue for free, I've got a great seat or a great position, I've got to meet the band and talk to the band. The least I can do is buy a CD or buy a T-shirt or whatever. I always felt really guilty if I didn't do something like that, buy some merch. It's something that stuck with me forever. Even when now I tour managed and went out with bands, I still kind of made sure that I kind of bought something from the bands I'd seen in some way. I supported them, So you, at this point now, you're with Clive, and then when does the RZA and when do the Wu-Tang Clan come into it? Then I imagine it's around this time that happens.
Yep, it was the last week of my summer internship with Clive back in 2009. And the Saturday before I had to leave, I went and saw the Method Man, Redman, and Ghostface Killer show at the House of Blues on Sunset Strip.
Yeah.
And I was pretty much just minding on my business and just going to the early show, because I only could afford one show, because they had two shows that day. And they saw my clothes, and they saw how old it was, like the merch people did. And they were like, "Hey, that shirt's pretty old." And I'm like, "It looks like you need a new one." And they were trying to get my money. And of course, I'm like, "Oh, I know I'm gonna buy merch from you guys. That's why I'm here." And so I bought all their merch and everything. And they go, "Do you want to stay for the second show?" I'm like, "I don't have any funds to stay for the second show." He goes, "No problem. We'll give you a backstage pass VIP bracelet, and you can just come in when they let everybody else in." I'm like, "This is awesome," And before people thought I worked for the Wu-Tang Clan, and the Wu-Tang Clan thought I was working for the House of Blues, because with the bracelet and the outfit.
Yeah.
And then I saw RZA and Ghostface Killer walk down the ramp, and I'm like, "Holy moly, this is awesome!" And I was first in line and everything. And I stayed for the second show, and the comedian Cat Williams was there, and he was handing out Dom Perignon and throwing money off the balcony. And he offered me some Dom Perignon, and I declined him because I don't drink. And then I was waiting for my car, the valet, and this guy noticed my shirt again, and because it had holes in it, and it was really old and faded. And he goes, "Man, that's a really old shirt." And he goes, "I'm Armel, I'm Jizz's artist." I'm like, "No way, this is LA, it's all smoke and mirrors." He goes, "And you don't sound like you're from around here." I'm like, "I'm not, I'm from Colorado, I'm just out here doing an internship." And he goes, "For what?" And I'm like, "I'm just with Clive Barker at the moment. And the guy that did Hellraiser and Candyman and stuff." And he goes, "Yeah, I know the guy." And he goes, "Well, here's my number." And then I drove off, and then I kept in touch with him over the weekend. And I called him, as he told me to, and I hear RZA's voice in the background. I'm like, "Holy moly, this is true." And then we scheduled a meeting for the Wednesday, and that didn't happen because his schedule conflicted. But the cool thing is I got to have lunch with Phil and Sarah, Clive's former employees, and Ashley Lawrence from Hellraiser 1 and 2 there. And then on the Friday, RZA finally appears at Clive's studio, and I'm like, I was hoping to introduce them, but they didn't end up meeting, which I was pretty sad about, And I was like making a big deal at the office, it's like, hey, RZA did Kill Bill the score, and
Yeah.
and like and it was so awesome. You got to meet him and stuff. And I was texting Clive, like going, just jumping off the walls, But I just ended up taking RZA on a 3-hour tour, I spent 3 hours with him, and I gave him a grand tour of the studio, and showed him Clive's paintings, and showed him like Clive's comic book collection. And turned out that Clive had some Wu-Tang comic books in his collection, because I had alphabetized everything from company to company and everything. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, RZA, check out the W section in that box over there. And he did. And then he saw like, there's Wu-Tang comic books in here. That's respect. And I'm like, yeah, this is wild, isn't it? And then he saw a big old Hellraiser 2 poster. He goes, that movie scared me. And I'm like, yeah, that scared me too, And then, Quentin, like, with RZA working with Quentin, and Quentin looking up to Clive, with this quote that said, to call Clive Barker a horror writer is like calling the Beatles a garage band.
Yeah.
And so it's like all these 6 degrees of separation going on. Mm. And RZA was like, I'm not going to work with Clive if if you're not a part of it, because I know you got to go back to school on Monday. And I'm like, I know it sucks so bad, But, RZA went away, and Clive walked into the studio, and he gave me his reasoning why he couldn't meet with RZA, because he was writing an emotional roller coaster, because it was like my last day. And he was like sobbing, and then I was organizing his library, and I started sobbing, He goes, what's going on, And he goes, I'm going to miss you, And I'm like, I'm going to miss you too. And he goes, come over to my place, and I got something for you. So he went up to his bedroom, and there was his butler at the time. He had him grab like a painting off the wall in his bedroom, and Clive autographed it, and he like wrote a little note on the back of it. He goes, after your final semester of college happens, which is like, this following semester, I want you to hang this up in your office. And I'm like, holy crap, so that means I'm coming back? I'm like, yep, you're coming back. And then I spent like 3 years with him, and that's how like the RZA and Clive Barker story happened.
Wow. That's huge, isn't it? What a huge sort of two worlds. And it's not so unreasonable to think that those worlds collide, because there is like a huge fan of films. It's well known, you think about Liquid Swords and stuff like that, and the stuff he was sampling from Shogun Assassin and things like that. There's no surprise the guy's going to be hugely fan of Clive's work as well, and horror and that type of thing. The worlds aren't that removed. It's nice though that you were kind of straddling in that and help that move that along. And it must have, like you say, it gives you currency. That if you're working with Clive, that at least people will know that you're not crazy. You're not a crazy fanboy, even though you enjoy the work. You're doing a job there. You're curating for Clive essentially, and helping organize his collections and what have you, and kind of helping him. Because one of the things that people may not realize, that someone like Tom Savini as well has a huge mass of stuff that they've amassed from years of producing art and years of producing work. And it's everybody's got that room or that closet that's full of things. When you're as prolific and as talented as someone like Clive, that's going to be tenfold. And you need someone to look out for you. You need someone to help you with that. So when you're working with these people, you must have got tremendously inspired as well. When you see someone as prolific as the RZA and the prolific as Clive, who were constantly doing stuff and constantly challenging themselves, did you start to think, what do I want to do with my life?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I pulled those two worlds together, and like, RZA was known as with part of the Gravediggers, which is like a horrorcore, like hip hop.
Yeah,
group.
Yeah.
And then he kept on bringing it up, and I'm like, I've never heard of Gravediggers, and I felt so bad, And then when he left, I did my research on Gravediggers, of course. I'm like, oh, there's 1-800-SUICIDE, that was on Tales from the Crypt. Yeah. And then I'm like, this is great, because like, Clive was known as a Hellraiser, and then like RZA was known as being a gravedigger, and so like, and then when they were like, one was digging, one was raising, they kind of met me in the middle, and I'm like, this is your baby, this is like, this is pretty awesome. But yeah, it was like I just, as soon as every day that I went to the studio, like I lived in Sherman Oaks, which is like down the street from Beverly Hills, I was like pretty much like, every time I walked into the studio, I was like hit with inspiration to create something. whether it was a painting or writing or something like that. And every night after leaving the Sunset Strip, I would go to Clyde's office because he gave me the keys to it, and I would just like write my articles after every concert. And I try not to fall asleep, but he goes, if you need a couch to crash on or a bed, there's always one for you here. And like, so that way you don't drive down Cold Water Canyon and stuff like that and get into a wreck. And I'm so thankful for that to happen, because those concerts would like end at midnight, and I would stay there till like 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. and write and just all that from like, with Riz and Clive being like kind of like my teachers in a way, or my mentors, and and I'm being Clive's apprentice for 4 years and learning from RZA for 3 hours. It just meant a lot. Like, I ran into RZA a couple times after. I went to like his show. He was on the same bill as The Doors at the Sunset Strip Music Festival at the Key Club, and Quentin Tarantino was back there with him, and I asked for both their autographs and stuff. And then I reunited with RZA at the Rock the Bells launch party at the House of Blues again. And he goes, I asked him, hey, do you remember this picture? He goes, yeah, man, that's so rad. And he goes, yeah, I was hoping like, we would all just restart this thing, because I'm back for like a little while. And he goes, it'll happen. But it did kind of happen, because like in the movie Nightbreed, the director's cut, it came out in 2014. I never asked for Clive to put my name in a movie. That was like my Hollywood dream, but I never asked him for it, And if you watch the movie and you wait till like the last 3 end credit slides, you'll see my name in there. And there's like Quentin Tarantino's movie theater on top of my name. And so like everything just came back together full circle, like, with the RZA, the Quentin, the Clive connection, and myself. And it just all came back again full circle, and it just closed that chapter. So it's pretty awesome.
It's very awesome. It's very awesome. It's nice, like you say, it's clear that the Clive and the RZA were very much a mentor's role to kind of what you were doing. And I'm sure you got an enormous amount of advice and stuff, and got clued in pretty quickly. Like you say, Clive suggesting you go to all types of music and things like that, and seeing that seems to be pretty radical. So then, what at this stage, what are you listening to? Did you find, was there a particular band or an artist that you really gravitated to? Was it the Wu-Tang Clan, where you were going, they're saying exactly what I want to hear, or was it a particular artist, or it was a particular band?
Well, when I was with Clive, like he would teach me to like explore every single genre of music, as I mentioned earlier. And like when I was with him in his office, he would share like, this is Barbra Streisand, and this is like the Harry Potter soundtrack, and we would go to that one. And I'm like, this is like so like totally different, and we just listened. Like I remember his CD collection was massive, and
Sure.
and I would rarely believe it or not, while I was mostly out in LA, I would listen to 90s R&B. That was like my cup of tea. Like
Sure.
I would listen to like Jodeci, and I would listen to like Tony and stuff like that. And it was like, and then like when I was like, away from the office, like when I was like driving on the highway, I would listen to like acoustic music, like Jason Mraz or Adele or something, and like they're like acoustic live albums. And then when I was driving to the city, I would like listen to like Alice in Chains or something more heavy, to
put up with the traffic and the road rage and what have you.
Yeah, because like Sunset Strip traffic is like the worst, and like the I got to be calm on the 101 or the 405 to be like, I got to listen to acoustic music on here. Like I would put on like Alice in Chains Unplugged, because that's one of my favorite albums,
Right.
And I would always find comfort in acoustic albums on the highway for some reason.
Yeah,
but I would
calmness, like
yeah, and that's the way you got to live out there. It's like, because it's so hectic and crazy out there. Yeah.
So at this point now, you've graduated now. Is that right? You graduated. I mean, when you're working with Clive and stuff, how long was it then when you graduated?
I moved out right after like that, and I stayed with him for like 3 years. I was his apprentice, and I was learning. Like he had like 2 other people that worked for him, so I learned from them while Clive was working on his other stuff, like Abrat and all the other stuff that he was working on.
Yeah.
And so like
did you ever think about writing like scripts and larger form like books and that type of thing, like Clive had done? Did you ever feel the need to do that?
I did write some scary stories at his place. Okay. They were like really intense, and I was like, man, like I would, it gave me the option to kill people, and like I was writing horror stuff. Like it gave me the option to like write like kills people and like makes like right sex scenes, because like he had like like some nude scenes in his movies, and they would always make me like my heart beat faster, and I'm like, I don't think I can handle this anymore, and it was too intense. And I would like his VP at the time, like I would let him read my stuff, and he goes, "Man, that scared me for like 3 weeks straight. Like I don't know how such a nice person can go into such a dark place."
Isn't it funny that there's a wonderful connection between aggressive music and horror and stuff? Is that the people that make these forms of art that are normally like absolutely horrific and terrifying, they're normally lovely people. It's like they kind of exercise all that anxiety and frustration and anger through their art form. That someone that comes up with something like Pinhead and the Xenobites is them extolling kind of all this anger. And it's the same with like the rap guys and stuff. Like someone like Be Real, who's like a huge character on stage, is this wonderful relaxed guy off stage. Someone like Eminem talks very softly off stage. I love that, and the metal guys share that as well, where they kind of get it all out through their music or their art form. I think that's a beautiful thing. So what happens then when you kind of finish up with your internship then after 3 years? What happens then?
Oh man, everyone was sad, of course, and I was sad because I was like, like the eyes and the ears pretty much, and like everyone came to me with all their problems, and I felt like I was like the glue that held everyone together, and that meant a lot. I was like, I just didn't want to get paid, and I was like, the walls were closing in on me with the Sunset Strip, and like, with the venues closing, and I'm like, it's just ripping out my heart and soul, like, and all that stuff, and it's just too much for me. And then when I decided to leave, they were sad and I was sad, and it was like the longest 20-hour drive home that I ever had. And I remember like staying on like Clive's couch for 7 days until I finally had to like said, all right, enough's enough. I got to go back home to Colorado.
Sure.
And I decided, my career like ended up going backwards. I felt like, I was like top of the mountain with Clive, and, writing about all these big old musicians that I just grew up listening to, with like either on top 40 radio or whatever, and just discovering new ones, like all that stuff. And I was like, why don't I just turn my power and use what I've learned from Clive and what I learned from journalism and focus it on my hometown of Pueblo, Colorado, and see what happens.
Sure. So for those people listening that maybe have never been to the States, the difference between LA and Colorado is night and day. LA is very much a metropolis. It's very, very, it's like London or New York as much as it's always on. It's very, very busy, especially central LA. It's very bustling, like Sareth says about the live scene. There's constantly something going on. Sunset Strip's constantly busy. But then Colorado is like the thing you would imagine the wildlands of the US is like. Colorado is beautiful. It's right by the Rocky Mountains. It's kind of, and one of my favorite places in and around Colorado is a place called Esther, where we went to, which was very beautiful, tiny places. Even Colorado itself is not that sort of intense, as shall I say, as LA. That must have really kind of changed your aspect, and it must have given you a nice time for perspective where you could step back and go, okay, what do I want to do? Is that what happened?
Yeah, I mean, I was tired of really living like the expensive life, It was like too expensive and too stressful, knowing that I was like the only one out in LA, and I needed to go back home and make an impact, and so I still had that newspaper gig, and it was like a national platform, and I didn't want to drive up to Denver anymore because it was like 2 hours away from my home, and I focused, my attention on the local bands, and most of my town is mostly metal and stuff like that, and rock and roll, and I never thought that, like I was thinking, it's probably like there was like a hip hop scene at the time, and there was like few jazz bands and stuff like that, but it was mostly metal. And so I started writing about the bands and experiencing more walls of death. There was no photo pit to protect me. So I was like stuck in everything. Like I'm just like holding myself like front row, trying to get good shots, just feeling it, just like mosh pits behind me, crowd surfing, everything. And I felt it all, which is fantastic.
Sure.
And I wrote about it the way that I found my voice. Like I just like perfected it. And then I said, hey guys, I'm gonna move again to Florida, and I just want 3 bands and 3 comics, and I tagged one member of each band that I wrote about, and they go, we all want in on this, and I'm like, holy crap, you know. So I guess I'll just turn into a festival, and so like a one night only show turned into a 3-day festival, and they booked everybody that like responded, yes, we want to be a part of this. And at the time, like I felt bad because I couldn't pay them, you know, and they're like, we don't need any money from you. You've done like more stuff for our careers than anybody else have done in this town. Like you definitely like you took the time to interview us and write reviews for our bands and made us look amazing on this national platform and took photos of us and never asked a dime from us. So why would we ask a dime from you? And I'm like, this is amazing. So this is a really cool going away party, I guess, like for a 3-day festival with like metal and hip hop and jazz and all the other genres of music and comedians too.
Yeah.
And then it started, it stuck with me for like 7 years now, or we're going on 7 years this year. And now that I'm okay, I can save money and raise funds for them and make sure they get money in their pockets and food in their bellies and buying merch from them with my merch sales. And then I, you know, play trivia with the crowd and I give away those as prizes. So it's like our own home distribution deal. So it works out for everybody and everyone's happy to do it every year. And I get to like pay them to put on a half-hour show and all that good stuff. And they just love being a part of it every year, whether it's paid or not. They go, we just love being a part of it. And I'm like, I got to put something in your stomach or in your pockets, you know, or something, you know, and they're just like, I'm just honored for them to be a part of it every year and bringing the whole town together.
I think that's a wonderful mindset. And I think it seems to have happened really organically, which is really nice. That it's when we were talking previously via messages and what have you, you essentially said you fell into becoming a promoter. I think you're not letting yourself off the hook with that comment. I think you may have found your calling rather. I think the love that you have for your local scene and the love that you have for the music of whatever genre you put on comes across. It comes across in your writing, and it comes across. I hope the listeners will appreciate it. It comes across now in the way you talk about music. That probably begs a very obvious question at this point, Sareth. Have you ever thought about creating music yourself?
When it hits me, I actually did write a song that I'm quite proud of. It's like a parody of Puddle of Mud's She Hates Me.
Okay.
It's called I Masturbate Me. And, and my very first comedy show that I produced that I was ever on was my roast, kind of like the old Don Rickles roast, you know, and
yeah.
Comedy Central. And just like a classic version like that, like Richard Pryor and whatever. And I performed it at the very end of it, and it's on YouTube, and it's like 500 views now, so it's fantastic.
Like, so let's talk about that. That's interesting that you bring up as well, the stand-up comedy, because I've been watching a few of you, the things that the links that you've had of some of the stand-up show, and it's really interesting. It's not like kind of one-liners. It's a very much kind of a lovely journey through your life, you know, being Cambodian and that whole kind of movie. And I thought it was fascinating. So when did that start? When did you first think, okay, I'm going to do some stand-up comedy?
The funny thing is like it happened at Clive's place, out of all places. Because I would like do everything I could to make Clive laugh, because like, you know, he was writing horror and stuff, and like I would tell him random jokes. And I would tell him random stories from my adventures in LA. He goes, Sareth, have you ever tried stand-up? And I'm like, nope, not in a million years. And like his employees were there too. And he goes, well, promise us one thing. Like I might not be able to make it because of like I'm busy and stuff, but promise these guys that before you move back home to Colorado, you do an open mic at a coffee shop. And that's where I started, was like at the Jump Cut Cafe in Studio City. And I did like 5 minutes. And I was so nervous. I have this like Wu-Tang superhero alter ego. And they were like, all right, no turning back, Sareth. you got to do 5 minutes for us. And I'm like, all right, I'll dress up as Wu-Man-Chu, my superhero alter ego. And I signed up as Wu-Man-Chu, and like the host was like, we've never had a superhero do stand-up before.
Well, you've got one now.
Yep. So I go there, and like some of my glory hole joke was like one of the first things that I talked about, and because I went to one because I was like I didn't know what it was in California, and my friend from like my other job was hitting on me, and I was like, all right, this has to end. So I got to scare him a little bit. So we went to a glory hole. It was just nuts, and it evolved into one of my jokes, and then I took off my mask and everything. I switched my shirt after I got off stage, and he goes, "Hey, where did that superhero go? I need him to do 5 more minutes." And and I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about, dude." And he goes, "So you're pulling an Andy Kaufman on me, like with his
It's a mask.
And I'm like, "I guess I am." And so I started doing open mics at home, and then that festival happened, and then 4 months later, my first show happened. And then, like, I started doing more stand-up in Florida because I was, like, an hour away from Jacksonville, Daytona, and Orlando. And I considered myself, like, a Daytona Beach comic because they were more welcoming of my style, being, like, a really dirty comic, without saying any curse words on stage.
Yeah.
And I love painting pictures because I get to be my, like, own writer, director, and producer on stage. And whatever happens on stage happens. And just seeing, like, seeing all those bands and back in the day, I was like, man, I got to feel that energy. Like I want to know what it's like to feel that energy, whether it's 4 people in the audience or it's like completely sold out. I'm going to give them my all. And sure enough, I got to perform like in front of like sold out theater in Atlanta at the Relapse Theater. It was like people were sitting on the ground and people were like standing in the very back because like there was no more seats, and there was like grilled cheese being made in the corner. And like Simon Bamford from Hellraiser 1 and 2 and Nightbreed, he filmed my set for me, and like you could hear like a pin drop because it was so silent with like my storytelling.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is wild. Like I've never experienced like 6 minutes of silence, but when the laughs needed to be there, they were there. Like it hit every single time. Yeah. And like you could hear like the moans and the groans when I get really dirty and graphic, and it was just like, this is so awesome.
That's the sign of the great comedians is silence. So silence is good and bad. So if you're really bad as a stand-up comedian and it's silence, obviously that's really bad. You'd expect people to be laughing. But if you're really good, if you're great, then those silent moments are the audience buying in and they're listening intently. They're waiting, and they're with you on that journey. And that's the best thing. One of the things, if you ever go to, ladies and gentlemen, if you do ever go to a comedy club, the biggest sort of faux pas you can make is to talk during someone's set. Because you're not allowing them in. You wouldn't talk at a music show whilst the band was playing a great song. So why do that while someone's speaking? Did you go through some stages, or did you find your feet fairly quickly with stand-up? Because the stand-up I've seen seems pretty well put together. Did it come quickly, or did it have to be workshopped?
It's constantly work and grind. Like I hit up like open mics to perfect them, and oftentimes like people would hear the same jokes, and I'm just trying to like add tweaks to it, like add a tag to it, or like punch it up a little bit more. And like some people would get tired of it, but some people would be like, all right, I love this joke, keep working on it, let's see how you get there. And like Clive's former VP was like, you almost got it, whenever you have that story, just keep on working at it, grind those gears and see what happens. And that's what it taught me out there, was like him teaching me that. And that's what, like, because we can't practice at home because like we need an audience, we need that automatic feedback, that quick turnaround. Like, all right, will this make them laugh?
I've always found it extraordinary that as a comedian you can do a bit and it can kill at one place and bomb at another.
Oh yeah,
that would drive me insane that you can work on a whole comedy section and kill 3-4 shows, absolutely kill it, and then go bomb. I would go mental. It's all about reading the audience and the flow of what they. And I didn't realize that my friend Massey is a comedian, and I didn't realize that it's all about reading the audience. That you can place a dirty joke at a certain point or a dark joke, and you can move that as you listen to the crowd. You kind of react. There's not a set list like it is a band where it's like we're playing this song, then this song, then this song. It's very much like you kind of feeling out the envelope of the crowd. Okay, they like this. They're going to like this. How far can I go with this? And I love that intimacy with the audience that stand-up comedy has. I think it's fascinating. And that's why I think, some of the greats that do it, like Pryor, is that there's a wonderful way he's obviously doing bits that he's practiced, but within those things, he's reacting to the audience. And I've always found that fascinating, terrifying for a stand-up comedian, but fascinating nonetheless. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and I've never written down any jokes because all those stories that I tell on stage come from like a real place. But I gotta like embellish it a little bit. I gotta add like a little lie to it. But like 95% of it's true, and I don't go on stage with any notes. I could do like a half an hour without any notes, and I'm trying to build more onto that. But it's fantastic. I mean, like you said, like 1 minute, like one place you would do super well, and then like another place you would bomb, and that's exactly what happened in Denver. Like I performed at the Comedy Works downtown, which is a legendary club in downtown Denver, and my name was drawn out of a hat, and people were going like that day. The comedians that were hosting that show, they were constantly roasting me and my best friend because I took him to the show, and they were roasting us the whole night, making fun of his tattoos and the way we looked and stuff like that. Because we look totally different. We shouldn't be best friends at all. Like he's more metal and I'm more hip hop, And so like they were making fun of us, and they pulled me on stage because like my name was in their bucket for like their to draw a name to do like 4 minutes on stage.
Yeah.
And like they pointed out to the two other contestants, and no one cheered for him. And then when they cheered for me, they went nuts. That we want to hear what this kid has to say because you guys were roasting him the whole night. Yeah. And so I did my 4 minutes, and the crowd just went nuts for it, And then like a couple years later, I went and did a 5 minute thing show, part of a show at the Mutiny Information Cafe, and just bombed, just no laughter, just completely silent. And I'm like, oh man, this is so rough. And it was the same jokes that I used at that place that I did over there, and nothing. I'm like, it was just stone cold, like Steve Austin. I'm like,
even bands have like a song that they go, listen, if the crowd's not with us so much, we'll pull out our big hit, we'll pull out our big song. But you're on there, you're on your own, and it's funny you mentioned we talk about Pryor when he did on the Sunset Strip, when he did that famous concert on the Sunset Strip. The story is that was over 2 nights. And the second night is the one that we see, and which is, arguably some of the greatest stand-up that's ever existed. And he's on fire and he's brilliant. But apparently the night before, he'd also done some time there, done like an hour and a half there, and bombed. And it was awful in his mind. And he gets off stage and says to his wife, that's it. I'm not going to, I might even quit comedy. It was that, in his mind, he was that bad. Richard Pryor was that bad that he bombed that bad. And his wife was like, well, listen, go out, do the next day, the next night, and just throw everything you've got at it and just go at it. And then he comes out and he does that. And you think, the resiliency to be a stand-up comedian is enormous. I respect stand-up. I've compared and had to be funny for very short periods of time in between bands and what have you. And I've just about got away with it. To do 5 minutes, which, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, 5 minutes in stand-up comedy is about 700 years on stage. It is a long time. You think you can tell a joke for 5 minutes? It's a long, long time. So when someone gets up like Pryor and does like an hour and a half and it's brilliant, that's because he's a genius. Did you then do? Were you comparing at your concerts as well? You said you got up and talked to the crowd? Were you doing that as well?
Oh yeah, I'm very approachable off stage too, and I think that's what people love about me. It's like I bring value. Like not only do I bring value to like my the comics because I interview them and I photograph them for free and everything like that, and like but I'm very approachable and people love my jokes, and they always like look forward to like my sex position acts, and they're just like my fellow friend. His name's Kevin out in Daytona. He goes, Sareth, I know it's coming. No pun intended. And these jokes are really dirty. I know it's coming. And just to like hear you say it like a million times doesn't faze me anymore. But then what my favorite part is when I look at other people in the audience that don't know what that's expecting. They don't know what they're expecting. And you just get dirtier and dirtier and dirtier. And they're just like cringing and cringing. And it's like the best feeling in the world as a fellow comic and a spectator. I get to see that. And it's just, I love it every time. And he used to run a room at a pool place, like a billiards place. And I cut my record album there. It was like, very talkative. I'll send you the link as soon as we part ways and stuff. But it's called Sex, Jokes, and Rock and Roll instead of Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll.
Sure.
And I called it Sex, Jokes, and Rock and Roll because I make reference to like Marilyn Manson puns in there. There's the Puddle of Mud song that I sang, and I referenced the Beatles and Iron Maiden and Judas Priest and Five Finger Death Punch, and there's just so many of these rock bands that you wouldn't expect in this comedy album that I reference, and just people love it for some reason. So it's fantastic.
It's probably because it's funny, but probably because it comes from your heart. You mean it, and you're talking about things that you enjoy and make you laugh and amuse you, and that's all good comedy is, because then it makes it relatable. People, if you're honest, and it's like writing, if you're honest, people will see that and hear that and read that, and it will come across if you're genuine. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that when we put some links up to Sareth's kind of whole work is you will see he's got an incredible amount of what they call hustle. Sareth is just, it seems like you're constantly working. It seems like you constantly work on another project, constantly working on yourself and improvements as well. And I found that very, very inspirational. Where are we now with the concert that you do now? Where are we with that? And what are your plans now kind of going forward as well? I think a lot of people would be interested to hear that.
I was planning on retiring from stand-up because I felt like I did everything that I ever wanted to do with stand-up.
Yeah.
But like Joe Coy, like he's like a world famous comedian. I went and saw him, and we hung out backstage one time, and he grabbed my phone and he gave me this amazing cosign again, like Clive did. I'm like, and then I got accepted into my very first festival this year, and I'm like, oh man. So other than my own, and so I'm like, I guess I can't leave stand up alone now because like Joe Coy signed me, and now I'm getting accepted into these festivals now. So I guess a part of me will keep doing stand up and still interviewing comics and photographing them from the stage. I started doing storytelling because I noticed that my storytelling it was like a common thread with Clive and horror and stand up. That's all my stand up is, a big old storytelling thing from beginning to end. And so I started a room at the Quarter Zone Cinema and Cafe in San Augustine, Florida, which is like the nation's oldest city. And that's been going monthly, except for like the COVID-19 kind of like derailed it a little bit, but we're picking it back up at the end of the month. That's happening every last Thursday. I'm producing my festival again, which is, we're going on 7 years strong, and the design is amazing. I keep everything amongst my circle of friends. Like my friend Charlie McMullen, he does the artwork for it, and it's I put the characters from Hellraiser into Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas because like Hunter S. Thompson and Clive Barker are like my two biggest inspirations when it comes to writing. And then so he's been drawing all that like the past couple years. And then my buddy Barrett Skoll, he's in a band called Sonic Vomit, and they're like an 8-bit, they have an 8-bit sound like Nintendo and like Mortal Kombat. Yeah. And so he prints out all my merch, so I keep everything like in the circle of artists, so that way more money keeps on coming to us.
Yeah.
And then I'm producing a comedy show called High and Dry Comedy Show, where it's like you got to pick two topics. It's kind of like set list, Stand Up Without a Net. If you've ever seen that, that's amazing. Robin Williams was on there, and so they pick out two topics and they have to joke on it for like 2 minutes. Like there's no like set list. You can't use your old jokes, And then
over here we had it as it was called what was it called? Whose Line Is It Anyway? We have a similar thing like that, where it kind of you giving jump off points and you do that,
Yep. And then I'm producing another storytelling show that I'm taking on the road called Loose Leaf, a storytelling show, kind of like Off the Paper. So like it's like real life stories, like kind of like This Is Not Happening or The Moth's NPR. So those are like my storytelling rooms that I'm producing. And like now there's no pressure of making people laugh, but like getting people engaged in the storytelling and
entertain them.
It's a very old art form that I love too. So it's fantastic.
One of the last sorts of bastions of free speech is the spoken word, is stand-up comedy, and one person getting up on a stage and going, this is what I think, this is what I believe, these are my beliefs, whether you agree or what they are. This is what I think. I'll either try and convert you to what I'm thinking or put up arguments to do that. One of the things that crops up when I talk to my other friend who's a comedian is that how important comedy is in order to help people find who they are. And by that, I mean that you should go to see a comedian who will offend you, if you will, or will challenge your political beliefs or your racial beliefs, or any kind of stance you have on something should be challenged. And the reason it's important is because those things, when they're challenged, if you're a fool and you believe something foolish and it gets challenged, it just dissipates completely. And the best way to do that is with comedy. When something's laughed at, it reduces it to nothing. It reduces it to being, the ridiculousness it is, be it parody or be it any kind of wit like that. And I feel that, like, it's certainly in this country, stand-up is one of the last bastions of that. Is that the case in the States? Is it still you find yourself getting up and saying and talking about stuff, and there's still states and still places that you can't talk about certain things, or you have to be careful?
Oh yeah, nowadays everyone's very soft and sensitive. It feels like, and that's why people heckle here, and they argue from the stage, and like people can't get to their sets, and people are very like, if you can't handle like a stand-up show, why are you there? That people came to see the person on stage, and that's what's like very challenging. But for me, like when people heckle me, I just like bounce off me like yeah, okay, I bounce it off of me like, all right, I'm gonna go back to my stuff and just like agree with them to disagree. So that way,
the opening part of one of your stand-up things is where you ask people, where do you think you're from? You say, oh, you think I'm from Asia or whatever it may be, and you put it on Front Street straight away. I thought that was incredibly endearing to you that you did that, and you were actually, I'm Cambodian, and this is it. I think it's very clear to me that it's something that you should stay doing. By the way, Sareth, I think yes, you're not allowed to retire, ladies and gentlemen. Will we let Sareth retire from comedy? No, we won't. I think it's something that it seems very natural to you, and that's something that all should be embraced. So now you're taking stuff on the road. Is that the first time you've ever toured anything?
My first tour actually happened with the Florida Georgia tour, and I did like 14 shows in 10 days. Wow. Like back to back to back, and it was just perfectly aligned with the stars, and everything that I ever wanted to happen on tour happened. Like I forgot my money at home, and my dad wired me $400, sure. and I people were like not paying attention in one room, and people were totally engaged at the theater in Atlanta, like completely engaged. I did 3 minutes here, I did a half hour there, and like wherever. I did like a bar to a theater to like an actual theater, like a movie theater. And it was just like everything that I ever wanted was like perfect. And I made, I didn't make any money on that tour. Like who does when they're on tour? Like I saved up $400 for like the hotels and everything. And then I came back home and I looked at my wallet and there was like $40 left. And I'm like, it wasn't about the money. It was about the experience.
No. Henry Rollins calls tours avant-garde camping trips, where essentially you kind of make your way around, and what maybe the ladies and gentlemen listening to the show won't realize sometimes is that to tour the States is to do 14 shows in and of itself is difficult, but the traveling and the road miles that are involved in that are unbelievable. But what happens when you go on those long hauls, if you will, is you learn a lot about yourself. You realize you're not made of glass, and you can take a bit of punishment, and you find an enormous amount about yourself. I'd recommend to anybody to tour if they're in a band, or certainly if the stand-up comedians, to travel the length and breadth of the country that they're in, because it really does give you a lovely, wonderful outlook. Like you talk about Hunter S. Thompson. Hunter S. Thompson, for maybe those people who are unaware, perfected gonzo journalism in so much that he completely involved himself within the subject matter, be it the Hells Angels or the Daytona races. He completely involved himself into it. And that seems like for yourself, Sareth, is that it's very important that you're at the grassroots at a live show. You're in the pit, or you're on the stage, or it seems to me that that's incredibly important. What's the live music and entertainment scene, aside from the coronavirus and the pandemic, what's that like in the US at the moment, for music and for artists?
At the moment, I've seen people just live streaming their shows. Some venues opened up their venues, but like nobody's in there except for the band, and now they're playing to like like what we're doing on like live streaming now, and that just takes away the magic. And as much as I would love to have Sareth Fest live streamed, I'd much rather be like exchanging energies with the musicians and the comics. And there's like no other brotherhood or sisterhood or family reunion like the fest that I have going on. And that's what like breaks my heart when I hear about like the COVID, just like and I've seen like all the venues with their GoFundMe campaigns and like halting all the small businesses and the venues, and I'm like, this is not good, and but like at least they keep their music going, and they're playing for like and making PayPal tips and Venmo tips and stuff like that. And so it definitely made that live music experience like just on life support, and it just breaks my heart, like especially someone that was actually in like living for it, like either on stage or as a spectator.
Was it before the virus? Was it when it was having a difficult time before then?
For the most part, for local shows, a lot of people didn't go out because like they were like marijuana was legalized, and I saw like a huge decline.
Really?
In the Colorado scene, mostly like nobody wanted to go out, and like Netflix was on, and people would just much rather watch TV. And what breaks my heart the most was like everyone would charge $5 a cover to the show, right? But like everyone would say, "Hey, what time do you go on?" or "Can you put me on the guest list? I don't want to pay the $5." But then when someone big comes in, like a big act, they would spend like $70 on a ticket to be like, I know, like thousands of feet away from the stage, and they're not up close with the band. It's like it was worse when like that happened.
Colorado, for those listening who maybe weren't aware, was one of the first states, if not the first state, to legalize marijuana. It was something of a test case, wasn't it? It was something that kind of a lot of states were looking at it. Let's see how it works out when we do medical marijuana and that type of thing, and how we're going to do that, and all the rules and regulations. And a lot of states kind of took that information and made it their own and did other things with it. But you said it affected. That's interesting. It affected the live scene then, because people were more happy to just go home and smoke at home and kind of do it that way. I think that's like I think one of the things that kind of gets brought up on the show a lot is people have forgot maybe or have been trained to not realize how good a live show is, and the experience that you get there cannot be replicated. And we're bringing up maybe certainly in this generation it's born from immediacy of like streaming services and things like that we're maybe training a whole generation to realize that to be unaware of how important live music is.
Absolutely. There's no like I made like the coolest friends at these live shows, and I met the coolest bands and comedians at these live shows, and pretty soon they're going to be like really famous, and then you're going to be really mad at the ticket price, but still you pay $75 a ticket rather than go to a free show or a $5 show, which I do not get at all.
No,
like
not at all.
I mean at these $5 shows and free shows you get to like interact with them, and there's like no manager or publicist to worry about it or nothing like that. Like you can talk to them up close and personal. But then when they reach that famous, and that's why I hope I never become famous, even though I've like hung out with famous people. Like I just don't want to be that, and I'd like to have people come up to me and like be cool and just chat, and talk about life off stage, and find out what my writing process is like. If I have some for horror but not for comedy for some reason, but yeah, that's why I made my festival for free, because I wanted people to be there for free and like experience the live bands and like treasure the local scene that we have, because like they're gonna be big one day. Just like, everybody else that was big, they started somewhere. And of course, there was like 4 people in the audience, like my comedy shows or a sold out show, like my comedy shows. But like every year it gets bigger and bigger, and then more people just show up. And I know I should charge at the door, but I just don't feel like it. I'm like, I'd much rather see my friends on stage and have a good time and bring everyone together. That's more important than money to me. So that I mean, for anybody willing to, what's the name of the festival? What's the full name of the festival? Sareth Fest Music and Comedy Festival.
That's it. Yeah, I didn't know the last part. I'll put some links on the podcast as well to that. But it's very clear. It's very clear when you go on the kind of the social media that it's made with love. It's made with a lot of care. As a lot of the beginning, a lot of the festivals that have grown into brilliant things now, they started in those beginnings. We talk about we have a festival over here called Bloodstock that was started in a very small hall and bloomed into this beautiful thing now. Same as something like Woodstock was originally started by a couple of people just wanting to put on a show for the people. Obviously, it became this massive thing. These things are started by people like yourself, Sareth, who kind of are willing to do this to maybe make no financial, bonus out of it, but purely for the love of it. If I'm sitting at home now and I'm listening to this show, and I want to become a promoter and I want to do that, what would you say to those people in their local communities and their local cities?
Make sure you do it for the love. Don't do it for the money. Don't do anything for money. Eventually, all the money will come back to you in some form or fashion. It might not be the actual, dollars and cents, but definitely do it with all your heart. And then people will be attracted to it, and they'll see that, hey, we want to promote our business. How can we throw our vendor tables and stuff at you? Or how can we put a banner on your stage? And that's when, you ask for money or whatever they want to barter. But like me, I don't usually get sponsors. I usually save up money, and all my friends are affordable. Like last year, it only cost me less than $430 to put together my entire festival, because my pals took it easy on my wallet. And that's why I don't book big acts, because I'm I can't afford these people, Yeah. But when it comes to my friends, it's easy for me to say, yeah, I'll book you, because I'll give you a chance. And they take it easy on my wallet, and that's all they ever wanted was a chance and a stage. And I'm that's all I ever wanted as a stand-up comedian, was a chance and a stage. So I know where you're coming from.
So if we have a lot of listeners in the States, if I wanted to be and play and appear at your festival, how would I go about that? I mean, you talk about only booking people, your friends and people you work with, I understand. But say I'm a comic and I live maybe a state over or whatever it may be, and I'd like to appear at your festival. How would I do that? How would someone approach you?
I usually book the people that were on there first from last year.
Right.
Because I'm they were there for me, from the beginning. I start locally, and then I start statewide. And if I have any room left, and then I go national if I have any room left. But at this stage, I'm promising the people that booked me on their comedy shows out here, just to say, hey, I'm paying you back first, because you guys gave me a chance, and everything comes back tenfold. And honestly, we rarely got paid as comics. We just was happy to be a name on our flyer, and that was about it. Yeah. And comedians don't do it for money. If you ask a comedian on my level, that's we don't make any money off this. We just like to make people laugh.
Yeah. Is it on multiple stages that you have and multiple venues? How is it kind of geographically set up?
How it's set up is that the comedians have their own dates, and the musicians have their own dates.
Right.
Because as soon as the comedians go on stage, they leave and go home, and I'm
Sure.
I can't, you gotta stay for the show.
Yeah.
And so but I noticed that if they have a comedy show, they'll support the comedians, and if they have a music show, the musicians will support the musicians. But I'm glad I'm the common thread. But what I do is I have them on 5 different dates this year. My friends own the venues, and I don't ask them to pay me or anything like that from the door or from the bar, nothing like that. I'm you guys raise the money for yourselves. I'd much rather have you guys keep 100%. I'll keep my merch sales, and I'll just split the money off them and stuff like that. And we just want stages to perform on, and stuff like that. But it's at this year we have it at my friend Smitty's Green Lake Tavern in Pueblo, and a block away or so, or a couple blocks away, for the next couple, alternating back and forth, is at a coffee shop called the Hanging Tree Cafe. It's not a racist name. It sounds like a racist name, because all the lynching from years past, but it's not. It's a really cool story behind the name of it, and people should give it a chance. Charles, the owner, is very supportive of the local scene there. And in the beginning, he had nothing but singer-songwriters there. like this, the acoustic stuff. And when I brought my festival to his venue one time, he heard like a Misfits cover song, and he was like, "Man, I love the Misfits," so he started booking like metal acts ever since then. I'm like, holy crap! So that thing that opened the doors for all my metal friends to perform here. And at Smitty's, they would usually have like DJs and reggae stuff and ska bands, and then like more metal people were like performing on the stages because of me, and I like opening doors for like bands that you wouldn't see at these venues actually play at these venues. And like we've tried so many years to be on that stage, and then here you come along and you're friends with them, and it's just easy now. It's like we get to play here, and it's like always a dream of ours. And I'm like, that's just so rewarding, because like just to hear that is like, man, that's awesome. I got to be a part of that, of their journey to just like unlock this door that was locked before. And
isn't it interesting that we go all the way back to one of the beginnings of your story, where someone like Clive and the RZA become mentors and inspire you to do great and powerful things. Have you ever considered, Sareth, that you are now that inspirational to someone else? That you are now maybe almost a mentor to some of those people that are around you as well, that look at you and go, you know what? Sareth's got hustle. He's got some moves. He's getting stuff done. He's getting stuff organized. He's doing it because he loves it. It's very clear that you're in a happy place. Has it ever dawned on that you might be inspiring people yourself?
It hasn't really crossed my mind. I mean, I really don't think of it, and I just like.
Let me tell you this before we go any further. Simply reading your electronic press kit about yourself made me get up earlier that day to get stuff done.
Oh,
because
wow.
I thought that you were a very inspirational person, and I thought that the hustle and the work ethic you showed was very inspirational. And I'm telling you now, there will people who will listen to this podcast, who will check out your work, be blown away, as they rightly should be, and you influence other people. And it's important that someone tells you that that's what you're doing. You've now moved into the Clive Barker RZA role for some people who will watch it. There'll be some kids who go to your show who'll go, who's that guy over there that's organizing everything that everybody likes and talking to? Who's that guy? And how can I be more like him? And I'm telling you now that will be the case. What I like to call it on the podcast, that these people are defenders of the faith. And by that, I mean that they're the defenders of these raw spaces where artistic endeavors can happen, and these raw spaces where people are given a chance to express themselves via spoken word, comedy, music, or whatever it may be. Those things are becoming rarer and rarer. And those people like yourself who are willing to do that and put themselves on the line to do that are becoming even rarer still. I salute you for doing so, Sarah, and I'm here to tell you that you are influencing other people in a very positive way.
Oh, I think it means a lot to me, and anything I can do to help, I'm just all for it, and trying to be like someone's light at the end of the tunnel, or in a good way. So, because I know how dark the world can be.
Well, listen, I'm sure everybody listening, should we get Sareth on again? Yes, of course we should. There's so much we need to talk about. There's so much stuff we glossed. We went quickly through his entire life. We over an hour and a bit talking. We could go on for much longer. But ladies and gentlemen, fantastic, the fantastic Sareth Ney. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It means the world to me. Thank you for taking a chance on me.
More than welcome, sir.
Awesome, sir.
Sareth Ney, the really interesting conversation. I thought it was a lot of fun. We recorded you have to stay up to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning to speak to someone on the other side of the world. Well worth it. I'm going to start doing them and speak to maybe some of my friends kind of further afield a little bit more often. Got a lot from that conversation. Hugely interesting person to talk to, with a great outlook and a real hustle to what he's trying to do, really trying to get involved with it, as many things as he can, any artistic endeavors he tries to support in whichever way he can. I'm going to put some links available on the podcast as well. But I really, really enjoyed sitting down with Sareth. We'll definitely get him on the show again. There's so much we want to cover. I mean, you must have seen so many bands that we didn't even get into, which you only mentioned briefly during the conversation. But you definitely want to check out his festival. He just does all the content he puts on. Check out everything he's doing on social media. It's hugely, like I say, inspiring, and really made me question what I was doing and how I'm going to approach stuff as well. Really, really interesting. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're enjoying all these sorts of shows that are going up, and I hope you're enjoying the podcast as a whole. I'm enjoying the Friday night thing that I'm doing, where I'm doing it live as well, because it's a nice bit of back and forth and understanding kind of what people want to hear from the show, which is really good. Got a lot of great feedback from the last one, so I'll do another one of those as well. And maybe once we come down out of quarantine and lockdown, I'll probably just do it to one episode a week and maybe some other bits and pieces. I think that seems better. I think that's more digestible for people. I think it's about the right amount of the spoken metal that people want. But as always, thanks for listening. And as I say, we are getting through this. We will get through this, and I will see you at the show.